It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Good morning, Vietnam. I mean Venezuela. I mean Iran. I mean Greenland. I mean Taiwan. Well, as you can see, I'm still in the tropics. I've moved on, but I'm still in Southeast Asia. And it looks like the duration might be a long one. The wars now raging or on hold for the moment are sufficient to keep the mother of all talk shows busy for a very long time, and I've got to be obviously available to present it. We're talking mainly tonight about Venezuela, but we're asking, Denmark, are you listening? Where next? It's the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
The kidnapping of the Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his good wife, and their illegal rendering to the state of New York so that the Southern District of New York can prosecute them for, get this, possession of machine guns. Yes, that's right. The president of a sovereign state is being charged in the United States, which eschews all gun laws, is in part an indictment that he's in possession of machine guns. He's charged with several other items, but none of them will get past the gate, at least not in front of any self-respecting judge, because the whole world knows that Nicolás Maduro ain't no drug runner. The drug runners are in Rubio's fiefdom of Miami, Florida. The piracy of the high seas over the last few weeks, where well over 100 people have been murdered by the United States Air Force. People whose names not even they know, never mind us. People against whom no evidence has been produced, was superseded for sure just 48 hours or so ago when a full-scale attack on the Venezuelan capital, Caracas, was mounted from air, land and sea. We know that, at least in part, there must have been boots on the ground, because how else could they have kidnapped Nicolás Maduro? And why did they do so? And why did they kidnap his wife? And what is the world going to do about this act of international brigandage, this atrocious attack on all that matters in terms of the United Nations Charter, in terms of international law, in terms of the sovereignty of states, in terms of the membership of the United Nations? Well, the answer so far in the West is absolutely nothing at all. The European Union, which has never done levelling sanctions, 20 rounds now of sanctions against Russia for its illegitimate breach of the sovereignty of the state of Ukraine, and which has everything to say about Russia, nothing to say about Israel, and even less to say about what happened in Venezuela. As far as they're concerned, they're watching it closely. But anyway, Maduro was a bad man, and that opens a Pandora's box that they might be surprised to see the end result of. The Greek Prime Minister wholeheartedly welcomed Donald Trump's illegal kidnapping of a head of state, because he thinks that that head of state is illegitimate. But that opens the way now for Turkey to get justice for Turkish Cypriots, and my bet is on them doing just that. That opens the way for Moscow to land helicopters in Kiev and kidnap little Zelensky and bring him to Moscow and put him on trial. I don't know, maybe the Southern District of Moscow can put Zelensky on trial for possession of machine guns or cocaine or whatever it is they find on his person when they do it. It opens the way now for China to kidnap the president of Taiwan, fly him to Beijing and try him for acts of treason against the People's Republic of China. And nobody could complain, because even the Americans, the British, the French, in fact, everybody in the world regards Taiwan as a part of China. So China would only be attacking itself, its own territory. And of course, that would be the end of Taiwan. Kidnapping Zelensky would be the end of the Ukraine as a sovereign nation state. But Venezuela is not finished, not by a long chalk. To paraphrase Mr. Churchill, the kidnapping of Nicolás Maduro is not the beginning of the end, but merely the end of the beginning, because the Hugo Chavez revolution in Venezuela is extant and intact, and its prince across the water, Nicolás Maduro, will give a very good account of himself in the courtroom. Be sure of that. In fact, Maduro and his wife are about to become international icons. Icons of freedom and resistance, and icons of the sheer ugliness of today's America. Naked and ugly. Donald Trump metamorphosing into Caligula in front of our eyes. Even physically, facially, he is becoming Caligula in front of our eyes. And the person who will be on trial in the Southern District of New York will not be Nicolás Maduro. It'll be Donald Trump. It'll be American imperialism. It'll be tariffs and sanctions. It'll be the enduring, ineluctable drive for war and exploitation of other people's resources that is personified, crystallized, perfectly represented by Donald J. Trump. If you asked Grok if Grok is still a thing, to paint a picture of late 21st century American imperialism, the face would be that of Donald Trump, who in a train wreck of a speech, I don't know, they say he doesn't drink, but he sure sounded drunk to me. Perhaps it was a sense of shock at what he had just done. But he was perfectly cogent when it came to the reasons. He's going to run Venezuela for the time being, don't you know? He's going to run a massive country 3 times the size of Vietnam from Washington, D.C., and with not a single U.S. soldier on the ground. If you believe that, I've got a bridge in London I could sell you going cheap. Do you think the movement of Hugo Chavez and Nicolás Maduro and Kelsey Rodriguez, the now acting president of Venezuela, are going to allow you to run Venezuela for the time being until you have decided who is going to take Maduro's place? You're a lunatic if you think that. If you want Venezuela's oil, Trump, you're going to have to invade it. And you're going to have to invade it with hundreds of thousands of soldiers, just like the United States did in Vietnam. Has anyone told you what happened in that war that you couldn't make, that you got 7 deferments for on account of your bone spurs? Because you didn't want to die face down in a rice paddy in Southeast Asia, did you? You didn't want to go and fight, but you send other people's sons and daughters to go and fight for you. You're a chicken shit, chicken hawk, Donald Trump. Peace president. You're an animal. You're a filthy animal, Donald Trump. That's what you are. And when you were sat there in Florida with your bosom buddy, Netanyahu, what's he got on you? Oh, we know what he's got on you, all right. You can fly all the way to Caracas and kidnap a head of state and make him face American justice. But you've got literally millions of documents, millions of them, maybe 5 million documents on the Epstein affair, and you haven't been able to arrest a single person. You haven't been able to do jack shit about your best friends being involved in trafficking children for illegal sexual purposes. Not one arrest. Hillary Clinton, lock her up. When is she getting locked up? You haven't locked up one person who cheated you in the presidential election of 2020. You haven't locked up one person who crafted the Russiagate hoax, which wrecked the entirety of your first term as American president. Not one has been locked up, but you can go all the way to Caracas to seize, kidnap illegally a man and his wife, the president and the first lady of Venezuela. You're a chicken shit, chicken hawk, Caligula. That's what you are. You couldn't fight your own way out of a wet paper bag, even when you were young enough to have bone spurs. You chickened out of Vietnam, but you're creating a new Vietnam in Venezuela. Moreover, you're threatening other people that they're next. And I don't just mean Iran, to which I turn in just a minute, and about which we will interview the wonderful Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi in just a few moments. I'm talking about Greenland. One of your senior officials published a picture of Danish sovereign territory, Greenland, a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. She published a picture of Denmark with the United States stars and stripes on it, saying, "You're next." This Denmark, the most slavish supporter of NATO, the most slavish supporter of von der Leyen, your concubine in Brussels. This Denmark, which has backed you in every crime that the United States has committed in the world. This Denmark, which, by the way, was the first country in Europe to recognize the illegal NATO breakaway state of Kosovo, an act of brazen illegality which required you to bomb the people of Serbia, the great capital of Belgrade. Denmark supported it. And now their friend and ally Caligula is threatening to take their sovereign territory, if necessary, by force, an Article 5 offence. Oh wait, can one member of NATO, Article 5, another member of NATO? I'm asking for some Danish friends, you see. But of course, that's not the only country on the radar for the Caracas treatment from Caligula. No, he's openly threatening with his fellow mafia boss. Which one is the capo de tutti capo? Who knows? Who's the boss? Donald? Is it Netanyahu? Is he up your arse or something? Who rules the 5 families that were set up down in Florida for the New Year celebration? Is it you? Or is it your concubine? Or are you his concubine? These are the questions we're all asking now. But whoever is doing whom, whoever's the jockey, whoever's the mount, the two of you concocted a plan to launch a new war against Iran. But you may well be biting off more than you can chew there, Donald. Don't even dream of landing helicopters in downtown Tehran. Have you seen Tehran? Have you seen the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps? Don't even dream of it, Donald. In fact, I'm tempted to hope that you do think and do it. But I better not go further down that line, or Professor Marandi might be angry with me. But be sure, if you and Netanyahu attack Iran again, then you remember those potentates. They're not really big enough to be potentates, are they? You remember these satraps that gave you all those jewels, all that gold, all that money, all those Boeing 747s on your last tour of the Gulf? They'll all be gone, Donald. They will not exist. No oil or gas will be produced for years in the Persian Gulf. Nothing will flow through the waterways, for there will be nothing to flow. All of your satrapies will cease to exist. And guess what? The fire that will rain down on Tel Aviv, on occupied Palestine, will finish the state of Israel for good. Maybe you won't have the bottle to do that. There are all kinds of questions which arise, of course, in relation to what happened in Caracas. And we're going to deal with as many of them as we can on the show this evening. But I want to say a couple of things that will be uncomfortable to my friends in Venezuela. Nicolás Maduro was surely betrayed from within. You cannot fly Black Hawks across Caracas without fearing manpads, thousands of manpads. You cannot fly Black Hawk helicopters full of American special forces across the skyline in Caracas without attracting any meaningful anti-aircraft fire. You cannot kidnap the president of the Bolivarian Republic with a few dozen or even a few hundred US special forces unless there is a Trojan horse present, unless there are traitors abroad. Somebody betrayed Nicolás Maduro. Somebody close betrayed Nicolás Maduro. And we intend, if we can, to find out whom. For sure, it is a bitter blow to the Venezuelan people that their president, who has the support of 1 million armed Venezuelans and millions of the poorest Venezuelans, it's a bitter blow. But it's not over, as they say, until the fat lady sings. And the fat lady is Donald J. Trump. I'll be right back. It's the mother of all talk shows. Full marks to you for your dogged persistence and your quiet and dignified insistence that you were right and I was wrong. I don't actually recall the clash that we had, but I would have to say that you are being proven right and I am being proven to have hoped for things that have not transpired. Because I said all along, I repeated it 100 times, that the big enchilada, World War III, an intensification of American involvement in the Ukraine war was more likely to happen under the Democrats, under President Kamala Harris, than under a renewed President Trump. And I'll go to the stake defending that position.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So 24,000 people have voted on this poll already, and I'm only now announcing it. Will Trump order a US attack on Iran? Yes or no? You can answer on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway. Best to follow me on that. In any case, you can vote on my X. You can vote on the YouTube community poll on the YouTube stream. And if you're watching on the YouTube stream, please, please, please subscribe to my channel. Give a thumbs up to the show. And you can also vote if you are one of the vanguard, the advance guard, on my patreon.com/George Galloway portal. You can vote. As I say, the numbers are becoming phenomenal in front of my eyes. Will Trump order a US attack on Iran? Well, speaking of Iran, you may want to call on that or on Venezuela or on any of the other ideas and issues I touched on. The US number and Canada is toll free. It's +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 08081 965522. And the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Well, our first guest, without any further ado, is the peerless, the sage, Seyed Professor Mohammad Marandi, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran, and very generous he is with his time for the mother of all talk shows. Professor, first of all, I know you are a pious man, so I apologize that you had to listen to some of the, well, colorful language and imagery that I deployed out of sheer anger and rage. I hope I have your forgiveness. But you were previously a professor of American studies. So help me, what just happened there?
Well, George, thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a great pleasure being on your show, and listening to you is always, for me, it makes me feel that my speaking skills are utterly inadequate. I think that Trump has dug himself into a hole over Venezuela. I think he's making a catastrophic mistake. Perhaps the Epstein files has something to do with it. Perhaps he wants to distract attention away from what's going on. And the economic situation is not good. Nothing is going well for the United States. So a quick win in Venezuela may have been a cure. But I think that this is going to fail. Kidnapping the lawful and legitimate president of the country is not going to change anything. There's no vacuum of power in the country. The vice president is the acting president. She has said that President Maduro continues to be the president, the legitimate president of the country, and the armed forces, the administration, parliament, everything is in place. That what has changed is that Trump, through his arrogance and through his thuggish behavior during his talk at the press conference, I think has united the country of Venezuela in a way that no one else could have done. By telling the Venezuelans that the oil is ours, who is going to support this? The opposition can no longer support such a shameless policy. This is 19th century behavior. This is 18th century behavior. This is early 20th century behavior. The political correctness has gone aside, and now it's just brutal imperialism. At least under Obama and Bush and Clinton and Reagan, there was some political correctness. They pretended it was about human rights. They pretended it was about sovereignty and about enabling countries and about helping. Now it's just about stealing what they can. And the Europeans, of course, are wagging their tails for Big Daddy and supporting this act of aggression, just like they supported their, I don't want to go to your description of Trump and Netanyahu, but just as they supported Netanyahu when he invaded Iran. It's clear that the entire Western political establishment has cast aside the mantle of human rights and democracy and all that nonsense. It is now about taking what they can to plunder what can be plundered and to subjugate everyone in the process. And this, I think, has united Venezuela in ways that did not happen before. Friends in Venezuela, friends of yours and mine who I've spoken to, and I'm sure you've spoken to as well, they're all saying that people are outraged, and that now President Maduro is more popular than he has ever been before. And some are saying that if this continues, he'll become more popular than former President Hugo Chavez. So, and one of the interesting things and correct me if you think I'm mistaken because your knowledge is greater than mine. The reason why Trump did not choose the Nobel War Prize winner as the president of Venezuela is not, I don't think it's simply because he knows that she has no place. She supported this war, and so she supported the murder that we saw. But I think it's because he knows that if he chooses her as president, he has to install her, and she has to go to Venezuela, and then he has to put boots on the ground. And yes, the United States can control the airspace of Venezuela. They can bomb the country and murder people. They've murdered soldiers. They murdered President Maduro's guards. Most of them apparently were murdered. They can murder ordinary citizens, but from the air, yes, they have superior technology. But when they come to the ground, when they put their boots on the ground, then what are they going to do? You've seen the country. It is mountainous, it is forest, it has jungles. It is the worst place for a superpower to want to have a war, an insurgency against it. So I think that the very fact that he did not install his president is because he knows that it would cause the United States to get into another Vietnam.
Now, the acting president, Rodriguez, was very clear today. There is only one president in Venezuela, and that is Nicolás Maduro. He is temporarily or permanently in the hands of the American empire, but that does not delegitimize him. It delegitimizes them. The mass movement that we both know so well of Chavistas, the supporters of the Bolivarian Revolution, launched and phenomenally successful under the late and great President Hugo Chavez, is still in power. And so nothing has changed. And Rubio appeared to accept that. And for the reasons that you have just admirably explained. If they pick someone else, they're going to have to install them. And that is, excuse me, that isn't going to be an easy thing to do. So the revolution continues. In what way does that improve America's position, not just in Venezuela, but in the world? It shows the United States in a light unimaginably harsh, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think that what the United States does in the coming days and weeks and months is only going to make things worse. And as I said, Trump has dug himself into a hole. It's not only the Venezuelan people, George, it is everyone across the world who was watching the press conference. He spoke like a thug. He wasn't even speaking like a godfather. It was just a thug, a neighborhood thug who was speaking. The oil is ours. We'll decide. We'll sell the oil. We'll choose who's in charge. Well, people in Brazil are watching. People in Argentina are watching. People in South Africa and Niger and Nigeria and Bangladesh, everyone across the world who's politically awake and who is following the news knows what this is all about. This is even the pretense of, as I said earlier, human rights and human values and freedom and democracy, which was always a lie and always an excuse to plunder and rape and steal. That has been cast aside, which is a good thing. I personally believe that Trump, who always says the quiet part out loud, is helping to destroy the empire more rapidly than it would under ordinary circumstances. And the people around him are, like himself, extraordinarily stupid. We saw Pompeo's tweet about Iran, where he basically said that yes, the Mossad agents are with the rioters in Iran. now the Iranian government, the administration, President Pezeshkian, intelligence officers don't even have to go on television to convince people that the Mossad is behind these riots. Pompeo the fool is saying it himself. All of this is very good news. The fact that they are so crude, the fact that they're murdering people is tragic. And I believe that probably having dug himself into a hole in Venezuela so deep so far, that he is stupid enough and foolish enough to continue digging. And that probably means more death and destruction, but it means a greater defeat ultimately for Trump himself and the regime in Washington. And the same applies for the Islamic Republic of Iran. If the United States and the Israeli regime come after Iran again, they're going to be defeated. Iran will emerge victorious, as they did last time round. It'll only be worse for them because Iran is now preparing for war. Iran is not going to be caught off guard. And the United States has overextended itself already. It's part of its fleet is in the Caribbean. It's escalating against China. We see the Chinese maneuvers in Taiwan. The war in Ukraine is reaching a critical juncture. This is not good for the United States, but I think that the people around Trump and Trump himself are too foolish and fanatical to recognize that.
I promise we'll come back to Iran, but on China, there was an envoy of Xi Jinping meeting Nicolás Maduro just a couple of hours before the United States swooped in and kidnapped him. This is as clear, I mean, I don't know if it was a coincidence. Sometimes coincidences happen in terms of the timing of this. But this was as clear a threat and a message to China as it was to Venezuela, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that is, again, it shows how foolish the Trump regime is, because how many enemies does the United States want to fight with simultaneously? They are intensifying with Russia. We know that the CIA was involved in this strike on President Putin's the compound in which he resides in. We know that the United States is intensifying its trade. It has intensified its trade war with China, and this attack on Venezuela is an attack on China because China buys Venezuelan oil, and China has investment in Venezuela, and Venezuela has very good relations with China and Russia and Iran. So there's no doubt that this is a threat to China. China gets its oil from Iran, it gets its oil from Venezuela, it gets its oil from Russia, and all three of these countries are countries that the United States is targeting. So I think this is only going to push China towards taking more harsh policies with regards to Washington. And this is something that Iranians welcome because the greater the antagonism between China and the United States, the more cooperation we'll be seeing between Iran and China. That's exactly what happened in Ukraine. When the proxy war in Ukraine started, Russia, which was cautious about Iran because it didn't want to be sanctioned, it didn't want to be antagonized and punished by the United States and its allies, it was now sanctioned. So it tilted towards Iran. And the relationship between Iran and Russia has been booming. The north-south transport corridor is rapidly making progress, and other aspects of the relationship are growing very rapidly. The same is true with China. And with the behavior of Trump in Venezuela and in our part of the world, what he's doing is that he's turning the whole globe against the United States. He's been doing it Biden was doing it through the genocide in Gaza. He continued this process through supporting and continuing the genocide in Gaza. But by expanding these trade wars and these military actions throughout the world, and of course there's Greenland, I think he's only making things more difficult for the United States. Now, why does he do this? I think it's exceptionalism. I think it's the arrogance of power. It's just like Zionism. The supremacists always think that they have special powers and a special gift, and ultimately they will overcome. They always underestimate their adversaries. The United States thinks the regime in Washington thinks it is exceptional. Even as the Titanic is sinking, they continue to be playing music and hoping that they'll reach their final destination, which will probably be at the
It was an
bottom of the
exceptional
ocean.
ship, the Titanic. That is for sure. Professor, I saw that tweet from Pompeo, and at first I thought it was some kind of spoof, but he asked God to bless the protesters on the streets of Iran and the Mossad agents who walked alongside them. I don't know if it's, Ozempic has ensured he's not the man he used to be. I don't know if it affects the mental health as well as the physical stature. But tell us what's happening on the streets of Iran. Only a fool would doubt that this is part of the ongoing aggression mounted by Israel and the United States. But how widespread is it, and how securely on top of it are the Iranian government?
It's not widespread. What happened, George, is that, as you know, you've been to Iran, you know Iran. The United States has imposed sanctions on Iran for 4.5 decades. They tried to strangle the economy to bring people to their knees so that they overthrow the government out of desperation. That's what they are doing to Venezuela. That's what they do to Cuba. That's what they did to Syria. That's a part of their policy. And only fools who think that they're anti-imperialists would support any of these, whether it's Syria or Venezuela or Cuba or Iran or anyone else. But in any case, because of the sanctions, obviously the government has more difficulty than ordinary governments when it comes to finances. Recently, we had a significant fall in the rial, which has happened often during the last 2 decades. And some business people went to the streets to protest because they were concerned when the rial falls. The goods that they've sold don't make them enough money to go and purchase more goods. It becomes more difficult for them to continue their businesses, and their businesses could collapse. So they went to the streets to protest and to tell the government that we need the currency to be stabilized. The first day, George, nothing happened. There was no violence. And that was the day when the protests were the largest. There were maybe, I don't know the numbers, maybe 1,000 or 2, I don't know. But those were the largest protests. No police intervention, no violence. Not like in the UK, if someone holds a piece of paper saying, I oppose genocide, if you're 80 years old, you get dragged off to jail. That doesn't happen. Or if you're in Germany and you have a kafia and then a young woman can get battered and beaten by the police. No, that didn't happen. But on day 2, we saw small groups of violent people, very well organized, in different towns and cities, starting attacking the police, public assets, public buildings, banks, and police stations as well. A couple of police officers have been killed. I've posted some videos of where they use a torch to set fire to a police officer on a motorcycle. I mean, if that happened in the West, there would be uproar. But when it comes to Iran, the entire Persian language media in the West, BBC Persian, Iran International, all of these media outlets that get their funding from Western intelligence agencies, all these tens of TV channels and Telegram channels and these cyber armies that they have in Albania and elsewhere, all of them have been working morning to night, and from morning to night and from night to morning, to justify the beating of police officers, the killing of police officers, using AI to exaggerate their numbers. They manipulate, just like what we're seeing in Venezuela. I'm sure you saw some of the images of Argentina, huge crowds, and then they said this is the people of Venezuela celebrating the fall of Maduro. That's the same thing that they've been. I mean, what they're doing towards in Venezuela reminds me of what they do in Iran. It's very similar, the fate of these two countries, and I'm sure that both countries will come out on top and defeat the empire. But things are calm across the country. Nothing much is happening. People are politically aware. They've seen what the United States and the Europeans have done in Gaza. They've seen the 12-day war where the Iranians were negotiating and the West was conspiring against it. And they've seen how the United States, over the last couple of days, what it has done to Venezuela. People in Iran see what Trump says, the oil is ours. Well, we have a lot of oil, George. We have a lot of gas too. And Iranians know that the ultimate intention of the United States, whether in Venezuela or in Iran, is for the United States to plunder, and the oligarchs in the United States. Ordinary Americans will not get anything out of this. It will be for the oligarchs to plunder.
Well, Professor, as always, you've helped the audience greatly in understanding events both in Venezuela and in Iran, for which I thank you most sincerely. Thanks for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi, the best source of information, not just actually on Iran and the region, but in the rest of the world too. Let me take a quick break then. I understand there's a record number of callers trying to get through, so we'll get as many of you in as we can. Stay tuned. I think you don't have to worry about these things with Mamdani, because my overwhelming feeling is that Mamdani is a phony. He has as much intention of doing these things as, you know, I compare him to a figure in British Labour history who became briefly famous in the US when Joe Biden was found to have plagiarized him during a presidential run some decades ago. But that man's name was Neil Kinnock. He used to talk all this flowery, far left guff like Mamdani does, but he had no intention whatsoever of actually doing anything about it, of doing any of it. So there's no chance whatsoever that Mamdani is going to defund the New York Police Department.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Well, this poll is like a runaway train. Will Trump order a US attack on Iran? Yes or no? Get your vote in on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, and on patreon.com/George Galloway. Let's go to Dubai for our first call, where Amir wants to talk about Iran. Amir, salam alaikum wa rahmatullah barakatuh. How are you?
Walaikum assalam, dear George. Happy New Year. I wish you a wonderful year. And it's a great honor to be speaking to you again. And I wanted to say that Trump would have been better off if he invaded Israel and kidnapped Netanyahu and his wife instead. Because then he wouldn't have been a puppet under threat and could have actually been the peace president he had ran on. And he wouldn't be dancing because there are tunes of threats.
Netanyahu is scarcely in Israel, Amir. He's in America more than he is anywhere else. I've lost
Yeah,
count of the number of times he's been to see Trump in just 1 year of presidency. I think Melania's getting a bit tired of it. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, but, as I said, Trump would have been just better off to have poisoned him or kidnapped him, and then he wouldn't have to have to attack Iran, attack Venezuela, attack Houthis in Yemen, and lose in all of those as well, actually. And I don't think that America is going to order an attack on Iran again, because it's not going to be America who does it. It's going to be obviously Netanyahu who does it for America.
Well, I think that's right. And what's the feeling like in the Emirates and in the other surrounding Arab states in the Gulf? Because, of course, they will be in very severe trouble if a war begins again against Iran, whether by America's proxy, Israel, or by America and Israel acting together.
Well, actually, to be honest, I think that where I am, they would be happy if war breaks out, and they would be hoping that the regime collapses and that they can make Iran into a Syria. But I don't think that's how it's going to turn out, and the opposite will be the outcome of this. But generally, I do not believe that they would be against. Especially in where I am, that they would be against the war with Iran, but the outcome I don't think is going to be so right for what they're hoping for.
Yeah, well, they've got their properties overseas, of course. So if Dubai disappeared as a result of the war, well, you could be sure they'd be far away from it when it happened. Thank you, Amir, for getting us off the mark. Amir in Dubai on Iran. If you want to talk about Venezuela, if you want to talk about Iran, then do call the numbers. Well, I needn't read them out again because I'm told the switchboard is melting. I can do comments. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, then just scan the QR code now, leave a comment, and I'll read it. Ronnie sends me $4.99 for the show. I'm grateful for that, Ronnie. Ronnie 1989 says, Trump is getting more like the mustache man from World War II every day. And Travag Line says, it seems the US war machine was deployed against Venezuela with a Chinese delegation visiting to negotiate bilateral trade deals. Indeed, the Chinese delegation are still there because, of course, Maduro's government is still in power and stronger than ever now, I would warrant. Bounty Lad says, George, I don't think you can blame the US for taking decisive action in their national interest and at the same time defend Russia. Well, if you think that what's happened is in America's national interest, Bounty Lad, I've got a bridge in London I could sell you going cheap, cheap, cheap. And Philly 5452 says Britain holds a lot of Venezuela's gold and sanctioned it. Indeed, it gave it to the last pretender to the American throne in Caracas, a man called Juan Guaido. Who? Juan who? And Fix In Man says, ask Professor Marandi what Kier means in Persian. Well, I know, but I've been dirty enough in this show. I'm not going down that road. Bijan is in Germany, in Hamburg, on the US and Venezuela. Bijan, welcome.
Welcome, George. It's a sad time, and I can just respond to what your previous commenter said. It's actually in the national interest of most Americans that the sanctions are lifted against Venezuela, and the government, the revolution established by Hugo Chavez, among others, and supported in their greatest election victory in 2012 by you, among others, that government was responsible for helping Americans with subsidized and free oil so they could heat their homes in winter. And that was something that policy continued by Maduro up until 2018, until the sanctions made it so difficult for them that they could not do that anymore. But I'm calling you because I think you could actually do something, and that is you have contacts, and maybe some of them are listening, in the diplomatic corps of Venezuela, because there is something they might not have tried yet. And this is to designate their president, additionally designate him as a representative or a head of the delegation to the UN General Assembly. This is not a simple formal act. It is actually something that could have a real change on the procedures in the U.S. court tomorrow morning, because tomorrow morning is the arraignment hearing. And the court that will decide upon that arraignment hearing is the same court, not the same judge, the same court that in 1988 decided on a case that you certainly will be familiar with, the PLO case related to Yasser Arafat, who I think you were a friend with, like you were a friend with Fidel Castro. And the American court decided that they can, by themselves, interpret the 1947 UN headquarters agreement as U.S. domestic law, meaning that you don't have to go through the international court system and the U.S. can disregard it, but that the court can directly say that Maduro then has immunity under national law, and that is something that the State Department cannot veto. So that would require that Delcy Rodriguez designate Maduro as head of the delegation and transmit that to the Secretary General, who would then be forced to act. And I think that's why this is so important, because we are talking about people that are saying, oh, this is a violation of international law, but are they doing anything? And you rightly said that there might be some people in Venezuela that are collaborating. We don't know that. I don't know that. I hope that is not the case. But the best way for them to clear that up is to take a clear position and to do what is best to free Maduro and his wife and to substantiate their legal position. And this is a very easy way that they could do that.
Well, I think that's an outstanding idea. Whether or not it succeeds in terms of narrative and in terms of political propaganda, I think it's a spiffing idea, and I commend you for it. And I'll certainly ensure that any Venezuelan official who is not watching the show, and I know that many of them are, will certainly have that communicated to them by me at the end of the show. Began in Hamburg on a way in which actually they could spring Nicolás Maduro from the Southern District of New York this very morrow. Now, who are the big donors of 2026 so far that have made it into the exclusive Moats Club? A big thank you to Francois Bechu, Adli Ayad, Jean Richardson, Sylvia Bernatovic, and Kevin Connolly. A big thanks to each and every one of you, indeed to everyone who has donated over the festive period and who will donate tonight. I think you're discovering all over again how important the mother of all talk shows now is globally in times of crisis. Scan the QR code now and be as generous as you can. One of our most generous supporters is the wonderful Donna in Panama, and she is a legend. Therefore, her call takes priority. Welcome, Donna.
Oh, thank you, George, and Happy New Year to you and Gayatri and the whole staff and all your family. And I just wanted to give a little shout out in solidarity to the gentleman recently who gave you $4.99. I mean, every donation like that is so helpful, and it's
Sure.
the right thing to do. It's a golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I mean, it's not fair for people to listen week after week and give nothing. And $4.99 is wonderful. That's what he can afford, and he gave it, and that's great. Anyway, Okay, a couple of
Agree.
things. One is I have a neighbor who, this won't surprise George, but it might surprise a lot of people. We've talked about it before, but I expected any foreign country to have more objectivity, more distance from the United States and its points of view. But here in Panama, not only do they use the U.S. dollar, but it's almost as though some of my neighbors they might as well be estadounidenses. They might as well be American citizens because they are so caught up with and involved in American politics. I mean, they know as much about American politics, or they think they do, as they do a Panamanian politics. Now, not all of them are right-wingers. I have a neighbor, for example, who is, let's just say, if she were in the United States, she and her friends would probably be Biden-Harris supporting Democrats, kind of left of center, but basically establishment. She is, however, supportive of Palestine, though I think she's come to that fairly late. But that's okay. At least she's in the right part of the column for that. But she said to me the other day when I said, "Oh my God, we've invaded Caracas," and she said, "Oh well," she said, I don't like Donald Trump, but in this case, I think he's right. Because, my friends, I have friends, they've been raped. I have friends, they've been in jail, in a dungeon for 6 months. And my friends, and I said, but it's a sovereign country. You can't do that. Well, but you said that people don't like him. People don't like Maduro. In the military, they are paid very well, but everybody else makes $100 a month. Anyway, you get the gist of it. And in other words, she has friends from nice families, and they hate Maduro, and those boats were drug boats. You can't talk to them. Anyway, second thing is, more importantly, and I'm almost afraid to use the name, but you know who it is, a retired colonel from the United States government, my dear friend, and whose first name is Larry. No, he said right away yesterday that the vice president is the one. She used to go around saying that all her opponents, all their opponents, oh, you're CIA back, you're CIA back. But actually, she is the one who made a deal with Washington to carry this out. He said Delcy Rodriguez is the double-crossing traitor.
Well, there are people who think that. There are people who think the defense minister, people who think the head of the presidential guard. I don't know. I'm not in a position to say. We'll see what Chris Hedges, Pulitzer Prize winner, thinks on that in just a minute. But what I am certain of is that there is a traitor in the midst of the Bolivarian revolution, whether in the armed forces or in the political sphere. Time will tell. We'll obviously be watching the acting president, Rodriguez, closely. But I must say her address to the nation today was exemplary. No one could criticize a single word that she said or the tone in which she said it. So we'll have to let the jury stay out for the time being on that one, Donna. But I promise you, we'll keep it under very close review. Thanks for that call, Donna in Panama. Panama, of course, was the last time the Americans came in, killed a lot of folks, and kidnapped the president of Panama. He then died in an American jail cell. And under the same pretext, that he was a drug dealer. I don't know if he was or if he wasn't. At least I can't remember now. But I'm absolutely certain that the last thing in the whole world Nicolás Maduro is a drug trafficker. And in fact, I know that the United States government knows that too. Well, look, let me take a break, because waiting to come and educate us all is the Pulitzer Prize winner, Chris Hedges, the presenter and producer of the Chris Hedges Report. Stay tuned, I'll be right back. Fabulous. Two great calls in a row there. One from California, one from Orlando. I think that Japan is walking on extremely thin ice in the provocations that they are currently allowing the US to manipulate them into making. I've spent a lot of time in China. I was there just a couple of weeks ago. There is visceral feelings about Japan in China. Of all of the countries of the world, China will never, ever, ever, ever forgive what Japan did to the Chinese people. They murdered more than 20 million Chinese. The war, which for us started in 1939 and for you started considerably more than that, further on than that. Japan invaded China in 1931 and didn't leave until their defeat in 1945. They further invaded other parts of China in 1936, and they killed 20 million Chinese people.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, 30,000 people have voted now. Will Trump order a US attack on Iran? Yes or no? You've got about 40 minutes left to cast your vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, and on patreon.com/George Galloway. Chris Hedges, he'd be my pick for Secretary of State rather than little Marco Rubio. Apart from anything else, he certainly wouldn't be owned by Miriam Adelson, but he has many more attributes than that. Pulitzer Prize winner, former head of the New York Times Middle East Bureau, a man used to the kind of things that we've seen over the last couple of days, and I'm keen, as I know you will be, to get his take. Well, as I asked Professor Marandi, Chris, what just happened there?
Well, the same thing that happened in Gaza, which is a complete disregard for international law. The seizing of Maduro and his wife on the pretense of drug trafficking, and there's no evidence, by the way. Maduro is actually not suspected of being involved in the narcotics trade at all. It makes as much sense as perpetuating a genocide in the name of Israel's right to defend itself. We know what this is about, the same thing that the invasion of Iraq was about. It is about the seizure of vast oil reserves. It is about breaking the back of any government or regime that defies the United States. We saw that again in the Middle East with the attacks against Hezbollah on the part of Israel, the bombings in Iran, both by Israel and the United States, and Israel's decimation of the military infrastructure in Syria following the overthrow of Assad. So it's about a world without law, a world without rules, where the strong prey on the weak, and that is, and what's frightening, of course, at the very moment that they're carrying out this incredible, egregious violation of his Venezuelan sovereignty, they're already talking about Cuba and Iran.
Well, we'll come to some of those points later, but this law of the jungle, and it was, I think, perfectly personified by Donald Trump in his train crash interview. I don't know if his officials are unable to persuade him when to shut up, but the more he went on, the more damning were the things that he was saying. But this might catch on, Chris. I mean, on the basis of what Trump did and said about what he did, Moscow could land troops in Kiev right now and seize Zelensky and take him for trial. The Chinese could do the same in Taiwan. Turkey could do the same in Cyprus. I mean, this law of the jungle can cut two ways, can't it?
Of course. Well, it essentially, and I would go back to the UN ratification, Security Council's ratification with Chinese and Russia abstentions, endorsing this ridiculous, you can't call it a peace plan, it's a sham of a peace plan. And that's where the UN Security Council went to die, in essence. And we're watching a disintegration of the rules-based order, which was often violated by imperial powers like the United States, of course. But there's no pretense anymore. And that's precisely what led to the catastrophic global wars in World War I or World War II. There was no mechanism to thwart the predatory nature of stronger states upon weaker states. And that's essentially the role the United States is playing at this point. It's very frightening and very ominous.
Are the United States strong enough to carry this on? I mean, they're openly threatening Denmark. They're openly threatening Iran. They're in war by other means against China. They were involved, many people believe, in the attack on President Putin's residence in Sochi, in Valdai. They are basically at war on multiple fronts. Are they strong enough for that?
Well, that's a very good question. I think you have to look at the United States empire as a wounded animal that's lashing out, ultimately futilely, to regain a lost hegemony. And that's what late empires do. And they engage in military adventurism, which only accelerates the decline. They have the military force to initially succeed in the same way that Israel is initially succeeding in the Middle East. But the long-term consequences, as we saw with the 20 years of debacles in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, they can't deal with. They create Frankensteinian monsters of their own creation that slay them, ultimately. But the preponderance of military force that they have, Israel has it, the United States has it, allows them to carry out what's classically termed as overreach. And then they essentially light these conflagrations that they can't put out and that grow and that further their own demise. So initially, yes. Ultimately, in the long term, it's self-destructive.
Now, it's clear that Washington has accepted that the acting president, Rodriguez, in Caracas, is in charge of the country. I've seen, as you will have, massive mobilizations of the Chavista forces in Venezuela all day today. The American networks were having to show footage from Miami and pretend it was from Venezuela, welcoming the kidnapping of the president, because the actual footage in Venezuela was of crowds of millions of people in support of the revolution. The Chavista movement is in power in Caracas still. So what have we got here? This conundrum that exists, where the prince over the water is awaiting his day in court, whilst the movement that he led is still in power in the streets in Caracas. How is that a win for the United States?
It's not. It's a kind of Pyrrhic victory, of course. They get Maduro. But they haven't in any way affected the structure. I mean, you saw with the invasion of Iraq, they, of course, immediately and foolishly dismissed all Ba'ath Party members who had worked for Saddam Hussein and disbanded the armed forces and the security forces. And what did they get? They got a virulent insurgency that eventually threw the United States out of Iraq. And the United States companies did not finally, ultimately get the oil fields, which is what they went into Iraq to seize, in the same way that they're attempting to seize the oil fields in Venezuela. So, by taking out a figure like Saddam Hussein or taking out a figure like Maduro, but essentially not being able to mollify or subdue the security and military forces, not to mention the popular rage at being occupied. Nobody wants to be occupied, Iraqis any more than Venezuelans. That's the whole point. That's my point of creating these Frankensteinian monsters of your own creation. So there's tremendous blowback that, as we saw in the Middle East, is self-defeating. And unfortunately, that's a lesson that the United States empire has not learned. And it's not learned because all of the people who have orchestrated those catastrophes have never been held to account. In fact, they still remain in power.
Was there a traitor in the camp? It's very hard to believe that the United States was able to fly slow-moving helicopters across the skyline in Caracas. We all saw it. If there had been any concerted effort to bring them down, then several of them would have been. It's impossible for me to believe that the president doesn't have sufficient force around him to prevent him and his wife being kidnapped and taken in chains. I mean, you're a man who's acutely conscientized about the origins of your country and the great influx of slaves. It seems to me the Americans love to see people in chains, and that's what we saw Nicolás Maduro in today. But somehow, even in chains, he looked twice the man of the men that had chained him.
Yeah. In terms of someone on the inner circle, well, I'm almost certain. I mean, the CIA has deep pockets. They have many mechanisms by which they can turn people to essentially act as informants or work on their behalf. I mean, I was overseas, as you know, for 20 years. That was very common. And I agree with you that I think it would have been extremely difficult unless there were moles around Maduro that were assisting the CIA-backed, Delta Force-backed effort. Yeah, I mean, look, this isn't a new story for Latin America. I spent 6 years in Latin America, covered the wars in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. It's not a new story at all. But in fact, Latin Americans are far more conscious of their history and the role of Yankee imperialism in their historical experience than Americans are. And they connect the dots. The Marines landed in Nicaragua to hunt down Augusto Sandino and install Somosa, the dictator of Nicaragua. They landed in the Dominican Republic in 1965 to overthrow a leftist government. They overthrew Arbenz in Guatemala in 1954. They overthrow and facilitated the rise of the dictator Pinochet in 1973 in Chile. I mean, it's on and on and on. And this is just part of that long history of egregious violation and control done by the American imperial power on the behalf of economic interests, whether that was United Fruit in Guatemala or Anaconda Copper in Chile.
I think that Maduro, who's quite a figure, as you know, will dominate the Southern District of New York courtroom presumably televised live to the world in a way that may make the US rue the day that they embarked on this. Why didn't they just kill him?
Well, that's what they did with Osama bin Laden, who was probably sold out by the Pakistani ISI. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, the reason they didn't want to bring Osama bin Laden to trial is they didn't have much on him. Al-Qaeda may have been behind 9/11. It probably was, but they didn't have much to lynch him on. And they have nothing to lynch Maduro on. It's anecdotal, but Scheinbaum in Mexico and Maduro were considered the two Latin American leaders that had kept their distance from the drug trade, from the narcotraficantes. They've been hitting those boats repeatedly and with no evidence that they were smuggling drugs at all. So again, it's a fiction. Again, fentanyl, of course, is the killer in the United States. There's no evidence that I know of that Colombia is a source of fentanyl. So, yeah, I think you're right. I don't think they have a case against him, if he's allowed a free trial. But that's a big if. I mean, there are courtrooms in the United States, like the Eastern District Court of Virginia, where it's one step away from the Lubyanka.
Yeah. Now, I know that you are a man who supports gun control quite religiously. But what do you make of a charge against the president of Venezuela that he was in possession of machine guns?
Well, but because that's the paucity of the case. So he was involved in drugs, and of course he had machine guns. Well, I can guarantee you there's plenty of lethal weaponry surrounding any head of state, including, of course, Trump. So it shows the absolute absurdity of the indictment that was written up against him. In the indictment, by the way, they call him the de facto and former president, if I have that right. So it was obviously written up some time ago. It wasn't written up while he was being transported to Brooklyn.
Wow. Now, the heads of the crime families were in conclave in Miami, in Florida, in Mar-a-Lago, I should say, over New Year. I must say there's an unusually close relationship between Donald Trump and Netanyahu. If I were Melania, I'd be getting a bit concerned about it. He's always around. He's even there for the holidays. He's boarding and lodging in their house. What could they possibly have been discussing in this latest conclave?
I think Iran. I think it's all, Israel's made it clear they want more strikes. They want the U.S. to join them, and Trump has seemed willing to sign on for that project. I think it's Iran. I think the Israelis are intent upon, they have this fantasy in Israel about regime change, that they can bomb Iran into regime change. It's kind of the fantasy, I suppose, that was used to perpetuate what's happened in Venezuela. But I think Iran, I'm guessing, but I think Iran was probably number one.
Well, Channel 13 in Israel this evening, which is not always right, but often is, they've said that Israel is sufficiently emboldened by the brilliance of Donald Trump's operation in Caracas to try the same kind of thing in downtown Tehran. What do you think the end result of that would be?
Those things can get very, very messy very quickly. The United States operation was, from the perspective of the United States, quite successful. The decapitation of Hezbollah with the explosive pagers was quite successful. But when they go wrong, they go terribly, terribly wrong. So it's a big gamble. I think that if the Israelis attempt similar kind of snatch of the Iranian leadership. Iran is not Venezuela, and Iran is not Lebanon, and Iran is not Syria, and Iran is not Hezbollah. Iran was able to inflict some pretty serious damage on Israel. Much of it was hidden, by the way. They hit sites, and Israel blocked, I know from friends in the press, they blocked reporting about those security sites and intelligence sites that Iran did hit. But Israel's not built to sustain a war of attrition. I aside from the fact that it is patently, a violation of international law and international sovereignty and the UN Charter and everything else, these kinds of activities, which the Trump administration has already expressed their desire to expand, eventually blow up in your face. And that's a lesson we should have learned. The United States should have learned in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Syria, in Afghanistan, both times in Afghanistan when they empowered the Mujahideen to go after the Soviets, and then when they tried to occupy and control Afghanistan for 2 decades. So this is headed down a very, very frightening path. And the success of the operation in Venezuela may, in fact, accelerate the collapse of the U.S. empire, because it will begin to carry out all sorts of other activities that not only won't go well, but will backfire on them in horrific ways, in the way that the 20 years of debacles in the Middle East backfired on the United States.
Finally, Chris, and I'm grateful for your time, what does this mean for the other players in the region? Rubio singled out Cuba today, said the Cuban government was now in serious trouble. What does it mean for China, that was left, to borrow a metaphor from Al Pacino in The Godfather, left with its dick in its hand in Caracas, meeting Maduro just hours before he's then kidnapped, and China not able really to do anything other than condemn it? What does it mean for Russia, which was and is very closely associated with Venezuela? What does it mean for the other players?
Well, it creates more antagonisms. Remember, China and Russia also have alliances with Iran. And as the United States goes completely rogue, we can start with the genocide, but not only the genocide, as I mentioned, the bombings in Yemen, the bombings in Iran, the invasion, let's call it what it is, in Venezuela, as these things expand, other powers, major powers like Russia and China, will have to become more aggressive, in a sense, to counter the aggressivity of the United States. I think that's what it means. And further alienation with major nuclear powers. Believe me, these people like Rubio and Miller and Vance and Trump, you do not want these people controlling a nuclear arsenal with no oversight at all. Congress is just a specter, a ghost. It's an useless appendage. It doesn't even pass legislation. I think they passed 38 bills last year, which is virtually zero. Trump rules by executive decree. He didn't even inform Congress of what he was doing in Venezuela. So as the United States goes rogue, it forces other major powers to react, and that's what you'll see.
It really goes rogue. Give us a taste, if you will, Chris. And this time I promise you, finally. Give us a taste of how this is playing in Peoria. How is it playing in the liberal publishing houses? How is it playing on MSNBC?
It's being condemned on the one hand. On the other hand, everything that's being condemned by the Democratic Party and the liberal establishment is meaningless, because they won't take any active measures to thwart Trump. What are those measures? that's mass mobilization, strikes. At this point, the only ability to curb the rising authoritarianism and the evisceration of the rule of law. But they won't call for that because the Democratic Party leadership is despised and hated and is as beholden to corporate and oligarchic power as Trump is. And they know that if they were actually to build those kind of mass movements, it's why the Democratic Party establishment has been so hostile to the new mayor of New York, Mamdani. I mean, they treat him as if he has leprosy. Why? Because those movements would sweep them aside. And they've decided they would rather stay in power as the ship sinks than give up power, and the ship is sinking.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As vicious as the Twitter sphere, where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, sorry about that interruption. I don't know if it was at Chris's end or at mine. And my apologies to him for the rude departure without a proper good back on Iran. Wow. It's headed for a record poll, but I've got to tell you, my apologies to Professor Marandi, but it is overwhelming in the view of the audience that Trump will order a U.S. attack on Iran. Let's go to the stage of Florida.
Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway. Mr. Galloway, Happy New Year to you and to your worldwide audience. Unfortunately, your audio is breaking up a little bit, so I'll run through my point very quickly, if I may. There has indeed been a delegation from China which had visited President Maduro just hours before his kidnapping. But what hasn't been commented on quite so much publicly was the purpose of their visit, which was actually to sign hundreds of bilateral agreements between the Bolivar Republic of Venezuela and the People's Republic of China. And indeed, some of the Chinese delegations had actually been acquainted with President Maduro, in some cases for over 20 years. This should all be seen in the context of the end-of-year diplomatic roundup by the Chinese Foreign Minister, Mr. Wang Yi, in which he specifically referenced their interests in Latin America. Then a paragraph to that same effect by President Xi Jinping of China in his New Year's address to the nation. But the most important context, and that was a direct riposte to the new version of the Monroe Doctrine as expressed as the Trump corollary in the U.S. National Security Directive that was published on the 5th of December, was in fact a very long Chinese policy document on their relations with the whole of Latin America and the Caribbean that was published on the 10th of December with surprisingly little fanfare. This was an incredibly important document that I actually took 80 minutes to go through paragraph by paragraph on a special that's recently been put out by the organization that I'm associated with, Weaponized News. People will be able to find that at weaponizednews.com. I literally went through it paragraph by paragraph. And what was key about that was that the Chinese stated that this wasn't just a conceptual paper, like a white paper that you might see in the UK, but it was actually a strategy for the implementation not only of the Belt and Road Initiative 2.0, but the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, the Global Civilization Initiative, and the Global Governance Initiative throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. It was an extremely important document, went largely unnoticed, was covered tangentially in a small article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal in the last couple of days. But this is basically the give and take of the ownership of the New World Order between the United States and the People's Republic of China. Now, we're now going to get an opportunity to see all of those countries put their cards on the table as we have this emergency meeting called by Brazil of the CARICOM organization on Monday, and also the emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council. So there's still a lot of moving pieces. It's worth pointing out that the vice president of Venezuela, who's now been of Venezuela, was also the oil minister. So she has a very, very good understanding of the oil industry, which many people are saying is one of the key items in play. But in addition to that, it should be noted that if there is any substantial disruption to the flow of oil, either in terms of the extraction or the shipping of it, were they to run out of storage space, that it's actually of a particular type of crude oil called super heavy or extra heavy that is very, very sludge-like. And if the pumping of that stops, what can happen in the particular strata of those oil wells is that they collapse, and the oil not only goes like tarmac, like road surfaces, but the sides of the wells can collapse, and then sand gets mixed in with it and makes it very, very hard to extract in future. So the Americans, if they can't actually effect control in short order, they may actually find out that they've killed the golden goose of the Venezuelan economy.
Finally, Simon, and I'm grateful for that erudition as always, what's the feeling, do you think, of the Chinese? Maybe feelings don't come into these things, but surely they can see that the attack on Venezuela was, in the grander scheme of things, an attack on them. And where does this leave them in Venezuela now? Are they still going to be doing business as usual? And if so, how was all this a win for the United States?
Well, it's, I think, a source of embarrassment that from an intelligence service point of view, despite the fact that we're told that Delta Force had been running drills on a mock-up of President Maduro's residence for over a month, clearly word didn't get out to the Russians or the Chinese about those military preparations. It's interesting that the unit that is involved in the aviation aspects of it, the 160th Aviation Brigade that generally ferries about special forces, has recently transferred a number of helicopters just in the last couple of days to RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire, a total of 7 or 8 helicopters that have been surreptitiously moved into the UK. One wonders if they're going to take out Starmer or somebody else in Europe. But in terms of where they go from here, it's very difficult to see how they could conclude all the agreements that they had been intending to do. Secretary of State Rubio has made it very, very clear that the United States doesn't want any power that's seen even as a competitor, let alone a international adversary, having any degree of influence over any of the transport routes or the natural resources of any of the countries south of the US-Mexico border. China obviously has a very large presence in Mexico, where they've been taking advantage of the relatively open trade relations between Mexico and the United States, and also they're very, very present in Canada, which, as President Trump has already announced, he would like to see as the 51st state of the United States, assuming that Britain doesn't already have that role. So the answer is, I think the Chinese are very shocked at the brazenness of the American action, and it just remains to be seen as to how many members of CARICOM are going to take US marching orders, or whether or not, like Brazil, they are going to stand up, and Chile, and very roundly condemn these US actions, which are unequivocally the death knell of the rules-based international order. It is truly the law of the jungle from here on out.
Yeah, it's the death of the UN also, isn't it?
No, I don't think so. I think actually that China, particularly with their global governance initiative, are going to use this as a lever for reduced influence in the United Nations by expanding the Security Council, and reduced influence of the United States in the International Monetary Fund by diluting their otherwise very large shareholding in that organization. So I really do think that this is a Pyrrhic victory. Now, in terms of where Maduro may indeed be tried and how much he'll be able to publicly defend himself, it should be noted that there's a good chance the trial will be moved to Miami, and then instead of having Democrats or Democratic Socialists, as they're otherwise known, in the city of New York demonstrating outside the courthouse, they'll have Venezuelan emigres, very anti the Maduro and Chavez regime, instead marching up and down the streets demanding justice. So you can rest assured that trial won't be as much of an opportunity for President Maduro to have his say to the world as you might otherwise like to see.
Well, thank you, Simon, as always, the legend. Simon in Florida of Weaponized News. Now, cutting that short, forgive me, Simon, only because we have now live from Venezuela, Diego Sequeira. He's in Baranas. He's a very famous writer and journalist and political figure in Venezuela, and I met him with my good wife Gayatri the last time we were there in Caracas. Diego, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. Is it politic to ask you, what's the atmosphere like in Venezuela right now?
Sure, man. Thank you for having me, George. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for focusing on what's going on here in my country. Yes, I mean, the atmosphere hasn't, after the shock, it hasn't changed that much as it has been under extreme pressure from, already almost 5 months up to this point. I mean, you have two reactions that are basically, and this is informed. I've been traveling. Yesterday, I was traveling the whole day yesterday, including small rural towns. So I had the opportunity to see and to feel what people are saying or what they are doing. So you have like two different strains here. One is calmness, and expecting, some expectation of what could do. And the other one, it's people incensed and mobilizing. Today, there are many demos going on throughout the country, including where I am. Barinas, by the way, is a state where Hugo Chavez was born. And actually, once I'm going to head there once I'm free of interviews today. But yeah, those are the two main reactions that you can see right now at this current moment. Is it going to change soon enough? I don't know. It's hard to predict. But this goes in tune in how it has been throughout all this month. People here are very cognizant of this kind of intense pressure. And of course, yesterday was the breaking point, no doubt about that has never happened before in Venezuela's history, at least in recent history, not since 1902. And it was a naval blockade back then. And so in that sense, there is not any sort of social breakdown, upheaval, or unrest that could work for the benefit of some of the regime changes up to this point. And I think this is the most important thing to address.
Well, let's address one or two other points, Diego, that flow from what you've just said. And what Marco Rubio, about whom we had a long conversation in Caracas a year ago. If the situation is that let's call it the Chavez movement, remains in state power in Venezuela, and I want your confirmation that it is still in state power, if it remains as the hegemonic force, the dominant force in Venezuela, then how is that a win for the United States? What might be going on under the surface that would change my perception that this is not a win for the United States at all? And secondly, I appreciate this is a difficult question to ask you. Both Chris Hedges and I believe that this could not have happened but for betrayal somewhere. Have you a comment on that?
Yes, regarding the first part of the question, I agree with you. I think this is a sugar high win. I think it's a short-term kind of win. And even within that context, if you saw, I'm sure you did, the footage, the first, let's call it a statement of Presidente Maduro yesterday, when he just said, asked Celia Flores, his wife, he said in Spanish, se dice good night. Is it said good night? And she said, yes, it's good night. So he said, good night, Happy New Year, and smiled at the camera. That's a sign of defiance. You can call it a sign of Caraqueño Latino defiance, if you will. And I don't think there's a real logical midterm calculation to what they're doing now. And of course, if it gets to succeed, which I'm also skeptical about it, what's going to happen with the rest of the region and the blowback that this can bring. This is not 1,000 kilometers away, just as Iraq was. The dynamics here are different, are closer to the United States, and they can be, and they are, more harmful in a shorter time for the U.S. population. In many ways, call it migration, fuel price, or whatever. That's something that those variants, I don't know how much aware they are, especially now that they're trying to give Rubio, although they're trying to shift the narrative now, this this viceroyalship kind of proconsulate of Venezuela. And there is no, and this is important because I was in another mainstream media channel a couple of interviews back in which they said, they talk about a power vacuum. And this is not the case at all. I mean, now we have an interim president that her first demand is to bring back the legal, legitimate president of Venezuela. And this was decided by the Supreme Court under the Venezuelan Constitution and has been acknowledged by the Venezuelan military. Now, on the second point, and I have to tread as careful as I can because I don't have any confirmation or any inside information to share, but my own personal speculation is, yes, I think there was a combination. It could be. We have to wait for more evidence and goods to be delivered, and I think we're going to see that this week at some point. But a combination of electronic warfare and, yes, to some extent, betrayal, which I don't know if the traitor right now or the traitors are now under the government and the law enforcement scrutinies. We should wait. I mean, they're being cautious about it, but I'm certain that we will know what happened here because, yes, I mean, we saw the footage and we saw how easily it was for a moment to do what they did. So it makes sense. And also, I would also like to address, if this is the case, I would like to challenge all the obfuscation that, New York Times and others are saying about all this sophisticated infiltration operation and so forth. If it was this way, it was pure and sheer bribery. I don't think it needed that much just to, other than humane, to pick the proper guy to do this and to infiltrate him, and nothing more beyond that. But another dangerous strain, I think, that we have to take into account is what was the role of AI in, the AI tycoons in screening and surveilling and designating a bank of targets and so on, which is something that I also cannot prove at this point, but these are the first impressions I get.
Do you trust acting President Rodriguez?
I do. I certainly do. Mind you, she was the one that actually was able to tame the economic madness back then. And also, there's no space. I don't see any kind of space to it, to some sort of backdoor deal of sorts. She has been already threatened by Trump just a few hours ago, saying that if she doesn't comply, it's going to be even worse, I'm paraphrasing here, even worse than with Maduro. So that's not exactly, I don't know, maybe it's, Trump swaggering or something, trying to shadow play it, but I find it quite hard. And also, even in the worst, let's be malicious about it for a moment. What can work for your benefit here, and how much is granted that you actually are gonna, that agreement is going to be delivered from a non-agreement capable country that has so many different voices at the same time, a schizoid country, schizoid empire. So even in a more cynical calculation, and this is me just doing an exercise of imagination, I'm not saying this is what's going on, it sounds pretty hard or beneficial. And that Rome doesn't pay, man. So I don't know how much that it will be there. And I do trust her, and it's not only her, it's also the Interior Minister, Diosdado Cabello, and also Vladimir Padrino Lopez, the defense minister, which are basically on the three specific and sensitive areas taking care of the country right now. So I do trust her.
Well, that's good enough for me because I have absolute confidence in you. I remind you, though, of, I think, Shakespeare, treason never prospers, for if it prospers, none dare call it treason. We'll keep abreast of these events over the next days, and I'm grateful, as always, for your wise counsel, Diego Sequeira. I'll let you get back to your demonstration in Barinas, the birthplace of the great leader Hugo Chavez. Let me take a call from another very important person, Colonel Richard in Texas on Venezuela, Vietnam. Colonel, welcome.
Hello, George. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I wanted to agree with your analogy to Vietnam because I don't know if you were there, but I was, and there were areas where you just could not go. Okay, the South Vietnamese government army couldn't protect you. The U.S. government army couldn't protect you. And if Trump and Rubio and the CEO of ExxonMobil and Valero think that they're going to put civilian oil workers in Venezuela to take over the oil infrastructure, they've got another thing coming, because they are going to be at risk at all times, and they cannot be protected in a country that big. Okay, if the guerrillas have to, they'll just blow up the wellheads, but they're going to kill anybody who comes in there and tries to steal Venezuela's natural resources. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is.
It is, and I'm surprised that wiser heads in Washington cannot yet see that. You cannot govern Venezuela remotely. Venezuela is already being governed, and by a movement that is fortified by the kidnapping of their leader, not reduced by it. After all, when Comandante Hugo Chavez at the beginning of this century was briefly overthrown, and the British government hailed the overthrow, only later in the day to have to hail the reinstatement of President Chavez, because the country simply became uncontrollable. Millions and millions of people were on the streets demanding the release of Chavez. Although it's not going to be so easy to release Maduro and his wife, life will go on under the revolutionary banner. And the idea that Marco Rubio or Donald Trump are going to be governing Venezuela by a proxy or remotely is for the birds, Colonel.
Agree entirely. The civilian oil companies can't hire enough protective people to protect their personnel in a country that size, and that means that the only other way to do it is to put American military boots on the ground. Well, we don't have enough boots to put on the ground in a country that size. I mean, we don't have. I mean, we had 500,000 in Vietnam, and look what happened. We don't have that many troops today. And even if we did, we couldn't sustain them that far away. Logistics would dictate that they would run out of food and bullets and fuel in 2 weeks. It's absurd.
Well, I have, as it happens, I'm on my way to Vietnam, and I have been there many times. And although I'm not old enough to have been covering it during the war, as a 14-year-old, I was on the streets of London in support of the Vietnamese. It's not apparently grasped by enough people, Colonel, that Venezuela is 3 times bigger than Vietnam. And look how that ended up for the United States. It's extraordinary how stupid the policymakers appear to be in Washington, don't you think?
I agree 100%. They are walking into a veritable buzzsaw, and they simply don't can't comprehend what they're getting themselves into. It's very easy to get in, but it's going to be hell getting out. And they're going to have a lot of dead bodies on the way.
Absolutely. Unfortunately. Absolutely. Colonel Richard in Texas, I'm very grateful to you. Now, the podcast ended the year on a high. Listen to this. We're in the top 10 for politics in Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Jamaica, Greece, Indonesia, and the United Arab Emirates this week. And we're in the top 50 for politics in Russia, New Zealand, Ireland, and the United Kingdom. You can download the Moats podcast just by scanning that QR code on your screen now. And of course, you can listen to the weekly podcast at moats.tv, our website. And once you've listened, don't forget to leave a review. Don't forget to rate it. And it might help if you also left your donation. Now let's go to the United States again. Nebraska, Artie on Venezuela and Russia. Artie, welcome.
Thank you, George. How are you today?
By the grace of God, good. I'm sorry there's been a few technical hiccups, but it's probably the biggest show we've had in some years.
Roger that, sir.
Thank you.
So, what I noticed during the holidays, my son and I went to a hotel, and while he was sleeping, I decided to watch this TV series called Jack Ryan. And it's as if they went, instead of plan something out, just watch this show, and it's specifically about Venezuela. And then they enacted it. The only difference is, at the end of that show, the actor is told he can't kill or arrest the president of Venezuela because he's the head of a sovereign state. So they copied everything in that show except that part. Now, the other thing that I found,
go on.
It's as if instead of going to the war room and coming up with something genuine, it's if you look at the show, it's like they just took pages off of that and say, you know what, let's do this. It'll work out. And I agree with you. They must have had someone in there to know where he specifically was, because Delta Force or other special forces don't go into a place haphazardly. They need exact locations in order to be as successful as possible.
Well, there's only two explanations, Artie. One is incompetence, and the other is treason. And I'm not sure which is worst. You've got the United States Army, Navy, and Air Force off the coast of your country. You know that kinetic energy is about to be unleashed on your country. Trump said it openly on television that land action was going to begin soon. So in those circumstances, for your president to be sufficiently unprotected that U.S. Special Forces, few helicopters full, are able to kidnap your president and his wife and take him to New York, that's either incompetence on a criminal scale or it's treason. Somewhere, somebody either effed up utterly or somebody took a dive. And as I say, I'm not sure which of these two options is worst. Thanks, Artie, for that call. Time for tonight's top donors. Are you in the exclusive club yet? It's easy to join. Just go to the website, moats.tv. As did Esmat El Sherbini, Pauline Cooper, Nick, Sam, Eli, and Amin Ali. Wow, a whole family. Please check out our new moats.tv website. Click on the Donate Now button and keep this show on the road, because I think you are already rediscovering that in times of crisis, there's no place like this for analysis. Your comments have been flooding in. Sparky sends $10. Thanks, Sparky. He says, wouldn't Trump renaming the Dutch Antilles the Trump Antilles better reflect the anti-European colonial spirit of the Monroe Doctrine than targeting Venezuela? And Nikia says, I have no sympathy for the Danish government. None. I feel sorry for the people of Greenland. You and me both, Nikia. I don't give a toss about Denmark's claim to Greenland. But I'm a bit amazed that the European Union doesn't. I'm a bit amazed that NATO doesn't, when one of their members is openly being threatened with dismemberment by another of their members in the case of NATO. Paul Bedson says it was pager bombs last year. Netanyahu and Trump's new fad is kidnapping. That's right. I mean, this is, imagine Trump in a balaclava. We have possession of Venezuela's president, and we will not release him unless on the acquiescence to our demands. And our demands are the theft of your entire economy, the theft of your entire national sovereignty, the national humiliation and subjugation of a Latino people, a proud Latino people. We want you on your knees. We want you licking our boots. And we might just spare the life of your president, who is a kidnap victim of ours. What could possibly go wrong for the United States in that? Harry Balsack says that's why they took Venezuela oil, to counter the closing of Hormuz. Actually, I've heard that. But that actually doesn't work, because Venezuela's crude oil is virtually unusable in the United States. It's virtually unusable because of its viscosity, its heaviness. It's virtually unusable by anybody except China, who've got the precise refineries which are designed to operate on Venezuelan oil. And Kid Pambeli says Don Nacon Trumpofone claims the Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Machado lacks the support of her people to lead her country. It sounds like someone is jealous. Do you know what? I actually did think that. He's hating on this Maria Machado because she humped him. She humped Trump to the Nobel Peace Prize. If you think Trump is not capable of that kind of childish malevolence, you've got a higher opinion of him than I do. And Trevor Davies says, I'm due to go on my annual 3-week vacation to my friends in Havana on the 17th January. Should I go or not, George? Viva Cuba! Cuba will stand forever. Nobody can afford to allow Cuba to fall, and the Cuban people are united, millions of them, under arms. Any attack on Cuba will turn into a Bay of Pigs fiasco that will be the end of everything. Comments have been flooding in. Gerald Martin sends $19.99. It's doubling with each comment. I was in a bad mood today. Then I tuned in to Gigi. You deserve a pay rise. I do, especially as my pay is nothing. Zero, zilch, nada, rien. I definitely deserve a pay rise. No time for Gayatri tonight. Imagine me having to explain that to her. It's such a busy show. Hundreds of calls to the switchboard. A final call live to New York, where Maduro is being held. It's the legend, Erobos, from New York City. Erobos, a sober night. The prisoner was taken through the streets of New York with the van doors open so that everyone in the street could see the prize exhibit, who I thought cut an exceedingly dignified figure, far more dignified than his captor, Donald J. Trump. What did you think?
Salutations and greetings and a wonderful new year to Moats. And condolences somewhat to the Lady Gayatri for not showing her fine fettle apparel for Moats tonight. I hope she's well, and Clan Galloway as well. I don't think people should be surprised about the kidnapping of Maduro. I mean, they were just the shock value of it. But generally speaking, you know, Obama kidnapped a guy named, he was the Haitian president, Jean-Bernice Aristide, right?
Aristide,
and sent
yeah.
him to Africa.
He was
and then he came back and he kidnapped him again and sent him back to Africa. Go ahead, Mr. G. You were saying something?
No, I was just saying Aristide was a priest, a Catholic priest.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was he had the party there, La Velas, in Haiti, and you know, and he almost kidnapped Zelensky, but I guess Zelensky was a little too quick, and he managed to. Zelensky was the president of Honduras, and he had to go into exile, and this happened under Obama, you know. So it's the same playbook, but Obama, you know, and people even saw your guest Chris Hedges was outraged about it. I mean, he's a walking encyclopedia. Surprised he didn't mention it. But this is not new for what the U.S. does. It's just Trump. And in a sense, I think overall it's good because, you know, as we've discussed before, this is going to encourage the reprisal. This is going to encourage opposition, right? It's not a black man in office. It's not a cackling, you know, hyena woman, black woman. You know, she's black sometimes, other times she's Indian. You know, it depends on who she's talking to, and she's not cackling like a madwoman. Harris, you know, she, you know, if they were in office like you mentioned prior, it would have been much more difficult to get so many people in the streets and so many people in opposition. You know, and the UN, the Geneva Convention, Special Rapporteur, and all these people that work for the UN. Well, not Albanese. I'm not speaking about her. I'm just speaking about the lawyers and the wannabe lawyers, the bureaucrats. You know, with their white glove lifestyle. You know, this is all a joke. This is all a hollowed out trash bin. You know, I have to disagree with Professor Simon there that none of this is going to make any difference, right? Even the excellent suggestion from the caller, I think he was from somewhere in Europe, about, you know, going through some sort of reverse engineering thing. It's just, you know, all America has to say is no, and that's the end of it, right? ICJ, ICG, you know, ICC, all of this is defunct and garbage. You know, it's coming down to, you know, blood and violence and bombs and explosives, and the person who's better at violence. That's the thing that's mentioned. Good people have to become better at committing violence, and not because you engage in violence, you're the same as the enemy. You know, how would you explain World War II? Were the people fighting against Hitler, were they just as bad as Hitler? That's nonsense. If you're easily compromised as an individual, you're easy to corrupt. If you have a moral core, as your living and breathing soul demonstrates, no, it's not going to happen. You know, and I'll just say thank you since the first show of the year. I just want to say thank you to you, to the wonderful Chai, the magnificent, first of her name, well planted in life, you know, for having me on, and the Moat staff and the Moat's audience. You know, I don't really get to exchange or have any ideas anywhere else people want to hear. So thank you to Moats, and thank you, Mr. G.
Well, we always want to hear you, and it's wonderful. It's like a kind of epilogue at the end of the show, and everyone loves what it is you've got to say and how you say it. We're not going to defeat imperialism just by shouting insults at it. We're not even going to defeat imperialism by marching, although throwing insults at it and marching are necessary, but they're not sufficient. We have to build a unity of anti-imperialists in the imperial world, and we have to encourage unity and power in the global south and in the Eurasian landmass, in the new world that is arising, in BRICS and in the SCO. We have to work constantly and tirelessly to make sure that the days of this deranged, unhinged, Caligula-like Roman Empire are brought to an end, and that will not be done peacefully, as the people of the global south have been finding for a very, very long time. But the victory is assured because the economic and demographic and societal fundamentals dictate that the power in the world is shifting from the west to the east after 500 years of domination, European domination, and the domination of a European colony, which is how life began for the United States of America. That epoch is drawing, I think, rapidly to a close. But the countries of the global south, the countries of the new world, are going to have to be much smarter. They're going to have to be much more efficient and competent. You cannot possibly allow your prophets to be slain. You cannot possibly allow your leaders to be kidnapped and taken to the metropolis and paraded, for that is what happened to Maduro tonight. I don't know if you've all seen the videos. They took Maduro through the streets of New York in an open cage, a cage with the vans open, so the masses could jeer at him. Only problem was, and this is maybe why they'll be moving to Miami, nobody jeered. You see, the people on the streets of New York, like the people on the streets of almost all American cities, hate the jailers more than they hate the jailed. They hate the police more than they hate the people the police are cuffing and shackling and chaining. And for millions of Americans, like Erobos, the sight of a man of color in chains at the hands of these brigands, these pirates, these murderers and killers, is not a sight that makes them want to side with the American exceptionalists. Your day is coming. As somebody said today, if this all isn't a powerful incentive for those who can to get themselves nuclear weapons, I'm not sure what you would need. If the events of the last 2 days do not persuade you to stop putting your money in Western banks, to stop investing in Western stock markets, because the day will come, has come, when they'll simply steal it because they are thieves, they are liars, and yes, they are killers, they are murderers. But they haven't yet killed me. And I'll be here, God willing, on the next show, which is Wednesday at the same time, 7 p.m. I'll be from a new place. I'm a moving target, but I'm determined to keep speaking as long as you keep listening. It's the mother of all talk shows. Thanks for watching.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.